What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of The Remote Real Estate Investor. I'm Michael Albom, and today with me I have ghall with Evernest, who's going to be talking to us about the Little Rock, Arkansas market. So let's just get right into it. Ghall, thanks so much for hanging out with me today and taking some time out of your busy schedule. I appreciate you.
Yeah, excited to be here and talk to you guys about Little Rock today.
Awesome. So for those who might not know you, give us a little bit of background on yourself and how long you've been in the real estate property management game.
Yeah, so started out in property management first about 5.5 years ago. So I work with Evernest. Been in the property management game in the trenches for a long time and started helping to buy investors' houses. And I think that property management experience really translates into helping investors buy, because I think there's a lot of agents who understand the residential side, but I think it's really powerful to pair it with on the back end, what does this look like? Because you can buy the deal, but if it doesn't perform, you don't know the rental rates, what the tenants want. And so, yeah, that's my experience. Love being in real estate. It's a hobby of mine. So I think most people probably resonate with that. It's, I get excited to get to do this work, get to work with buyers, but something also kind of personally interested in.
Totally. And how many deals would you say you've done in the last 12 months on the purchase and then sale side?
So our team is done. We're crossing over the 600 threshold, and we've got brokers in kind of multiple markets. And I've done around 100 this year.
Oh, that's awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah, so it's fun helping a lot of investors. So it's you get tons of market exposure, and this market's been crazy this year. And so doing consistent deals help you to keep up on the market and making sure that you're staying competitive, because it certainly is still competitive out there.
It sure seems like it. And Gray, when you're not helping investors find properties or managing folks, what is it that you like to do in your free time?
So married, and so love hanging out with my wife. We like being outside, and so camping is something we enjoy to do together. Haven't yet found an action sport that we like to do together. So camping's kind of our thing. We've got a little dog, a black lab. So anything being outside is where we try to spend our time.
Right on. So let's shift gears here and focus on the Little Rock market as a whole. So can you give folks an idea of why are people moving to Little Rock, or why do people live in Little Rock? What's going on there? Who are some of the businesses, the big employers there?
Yeah, so Little Rock is the capital of Arkansas, kind of smack dab in the middle there. You've got Memphis on the east side. It kind of borders up on Oklahoma and Texas below it. So it's kind of like right in the middle of the state. Some of the big main employers are just government, with it being the capital there. So that's kind of one of the big drivers. There's not tons of big companies there. There's not like a burgeoning like tech scene like you've heard. It's a lot of kind of blue collar. Dillard's is one of the biggest companies. If you ever shop there, I remember going with my grandmother to Dillard's department store. So that's headquartered in Little Rock. But government's kind of really the main thing that drives, which gives stability to the market. And I think that's kind of overall what I think about is just kind of stability. So it's had stable rent growth, stable population growth, stable home price appreciation. Up in Jacksonville, and we'll look at the map here in a minute, there's an Air Force base up there. And so, that's a lot of kind of the drivers on the economic side, but just a lot of kind of mom and pop small businesses with some blue collar work up there.
Okay, awesome. And why don't we go ahead and pull up the map here? And if you're checking this out on YouTube, you can follow along. If you're listening to this podcast, you can try to follow along as best you can. But Gray's going to pull up a map here and then walk us all through, just at a high level, some of the different neighborhoods, submarkets, and areas to keep an eye out for as a new investor is looking at the market.
All right. So we've got Little Rock right here. I kind of zoomed out showing where it is in relation to some of the other cities. And so when we talk about kind of city of Little Rock, a lot of what we're talking about are kind of suburbs or communities outside the city center. So a lot of the places that, our property manager loves to manage and I like to buy are going to be some of these sub areas. And so we'll kind of start going through those. We've got the Benton and Bryant area and Alexander. These are all, within 30-minute drive of downtown Little Rock. So if people are commuting to their jobs, it's still within the commuting range. These have really good school systems. So houses rent really fast there. Typical 3-2 on a rental side is going to be in that $1,300 to $1,600 range, depending on condition and square footage. But these houses go really quickly. This county's got a higher percentage of homeowners, and so it's kind of in that B class, maybe some low A class stuff there. So investors really like this area down here. So the Benton and Bryant areas.
Okay. And Gray, for the purchase prices down there, what are we looking at for your typical 3-2?
Yeah, they've kind of gone up. So, I mean, you're probably talking in the 150 to 200s. And I've seen them creep higher towards the 200s. So cap rate and returns are going to be compressed there. We have seen rent growth, but the story a lot of the country is home prices have outpaced kind of rent growth in some of these areas over the past year. And so probably was a better buy 2 years ago, but still, if you can find a good deal down there, which everything was,
yeah, welcome to the club, man.
Could have gone back. Exactly. So I think it's, just good, stable, it's a good school system. People like renting there, but a little bit lower returns than some of these other areas where you can get closer to the 1% rule. So you're going to be sub that in this market.
Okay. And is there a kind of general ballpark theme for vintage of a lot of the homes in Little Rock, or do you have running the gambit from older to new build?
Yeah. And like most cities, so closer to the city center is going to be the older. And as things, expands in the kind of 50s, 60s, 70s, you're going to start hitting some of these communities. And so that's when we'll jump up to Cabot and kind of Jacksonwood and Sherwood. Closer to the city center, you're going to have some 20s, which I'd probably recommend to stay away from, and kind of focus in on that 1950s and above. And so these houses, you're going to have probably 1950s and above, with a lot of them in the 60s.
Okay, great.
Yeah. You want to move on to next areas?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. So kind of zooming in, this is West Little Rock. It's going to be tougher to make the numbers here work. This is probably your nicest stuff in Little Rock. It's going to be A class, so we don't spend too much time on that. But 3.2 is going to rent in the 1,800, 17, 1,900 range over there. So some higher rent stuff, but really high percentage of homeowners. Homes are going to be in the 200s there. And so it's been tough for us to kind of find houses that make the numbers work there. But if you can occasionally find one over there, it might be a good blend. Not a ton of cash flow, but that's kind of where we're seeing the home values be on the higher end over there.
And what have you seen kind of, I guess, on the west side, we'll take it as the extreme example. What have you seen appreciation do over the last couple of years?
So, previous to last year, which was just kind of a rocket ship for everybody, I mean, it's kind of been steady in that, 2 to 3%. And then we've seen that bump up over the past year. I haven't looked recently just what it's been this year, but the numbers are above 5% on the home appreciation side.
That's wild.
Yeah, it is. So, but it's kind of steady, consistent growth between 2.5% to 3.5%, depending on what data source you look at. Kind of slowly crept up over time.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So then we shift over to the Jacksonville?
Yeah. So we'll kind of go in the river right here, kind of separates, Little Rock from North Little Rock. And so North Little Rock is an area you can see it pop up on the map. And so that kind of runs from the river. And then you can still consider some of this area North Little Rock. So this is going to be a little bit rougher of an area, probably C- housing. Once you kind of cross over 40 here, there's some good stuff to be had. This is probably your traditional C+ class in the 1940s to 1960s vintage. The 3-bed, 2-bath rents are going to be in $1,100 to $1,200 in this area, and purchase prices, between depending on how much work's needed. With the older vintage house, you've got the opportunity to do some value add. But if you were looking for a rent ready house, you'd probably be in that 120 range right now. Something that's kind of move-in ready. Then you got Sherwood, which is a really good area, C+, kind of B- houses. The 3-bedroom, 2-baths are in that 1,400 to 1,500 range. And so you'll kind of see as you get out of the city center, rents start kind of creeping up as you kind of move up 67 here. So really good area. I like this stuff. Just kind of your standard 3.1, 1.5, 3.2 houses. Home prices right now, 160s, 170s, what I'm seeing for rent ready, kind of move-in ready, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. And so you'll have about a $1,400 to $1,500 rental rate on properties in the Sherwood area. If you're consistently looking at the properties that I'm putting up on Roofstock, once a week, you should be able to come across something that looks good up there that doesn't require a ton of work. So I think that's why people like the market, because you can still get really good numbers and you're not kind of priced out from a cap rate standpoint. So we'll kind of move up 67. So you've got Sherwood's right here, and then Jacksonville. So I mentioned the Air Force Base is in Jacksonville. And so it starts to get more rural as you get outside of town. But Jacksonville is, seen rental demand pick up over the past couple of years here. And so I was looking at some houses. This is kind of more pocket street by street. So if you've got questions on a house, reach out. There's some areas that we probably tell you to stay away from, and there's some areas we kind of point you to. Like anything kind of on this north side of 67 over here. So Little Rock Air Force Base right there. And then there's some pockets in here that we like that you can still get strong rental numbers on. The rents are a little bit lower than Sherwood and Jacksonville. So you might be in that kind of 1,300 range, maybe 11 to 1,300 range, depending on the property for your kind of, down the middle of the fairway 3-2. And then Cabot's an area that I really like. It's got some newer housing. So I've been putting up some properties that are in the post 2000 range. We've got some new builds kind of going on here, a few subdivisions in there. And so, these properties, new move-in ready 3-2, like I'm thinking of one that was built in 2004. It's on the market for 160. You can probably get it in the 150, 160 range. And I think rental rates are going to be in 1,300 to 1,400. And so still really good numbers, pretty close to the 1% rule. And there's even some new builds. If you get up into Austin and Ward, it gets a little bit more rural out here, but I've seen some new builds that are at the 1% rule. And so I think that's really cool when you can still get newer properties and be able to hit the close to the 1% roll, because your repairs are going to be so much lower. And you're not dealing with a 1940s, 50s vintage house, which has its own issues in there. So, putting a lot of good stuff up in the Cabot area that we really like.
So Gray, I'm curious, up in those more rural areas, do you see properties renting as quickly as you do as some of the more centrally located ones?
So great question. This is something that we've seen as you kind of buy properties and get them rented. If they're close to, they've got a really good school system up here. So if they're kind of close to the city of Cabot, you're not going to have too much of a drop off. It becomes more of an issue when you get outside and you get on where there's just less houses out there. Mm-hmm. So kind of proximity to Little Rock isn't necessarily going to affect that. But if you bought stuff kind of in these areas over here, you're not going to have issues. But do know that if you're buying something that's on a little bit more acreage or it's a little bit further out, you can't get top dollar, or your vacancy is just going to be a longer period before somebody's willing to pay that. But overall in Little Rock, we're seeing really low days on market. Even right now, it's kind of the holiday season when we're recording this. Typically see the longest days on market, but when I looked last, we were less than 12 days on market. And so our average is, we always shoot to be below 30. And so, in the summertime is probably a really good time to look at that. And we're typically in that, high teens, low 20s number. So properties are renting fast there. There's no shortage of demands for renters as long as you're pricing the property right and you're putting out a good product.
Okay. That's awesome. Are there any other markets and kind of sub-markets, neighborhoods within Little Rock that you wanted to highlight?
Yeah, one more, Conway up here. So a lot of what we're talking again is kind of on the outskirts. And I think there's other good areas just kind of hitting the highlights, but Conway's another one. It's got 3 colleges there. So it's a college town. And so there's a higher proportion of people. That's kind of the draw to Conway. But we're seeing some new stuff being built up in Conway. Aaron Dreer, our local property manager in Little Rock, loves the market, loves anything that she can get her hands to manage in Conway. Typically nice purchase price, but they're probably in the 200s, close to the 200s. And so I think you're going to get better return probably in the Cabot and the Sherwood area. But this is something to keep an eye on is the Conway area. And I think just as the city grows, we're seeing some new builds just kind of along this interstate here, and the same thing here. So as the cities expand, just kind of looking at, we're kind of getting the path of growth. And so we're seeing some cool new build developments up here. There's not much going on right now, but you're so close to Little Rock that it's an attractive place for people to live and be able to move into a newer build.
Interesting. Okay. And Greg, can you tell everyone how property taxes work in Little Rock?
Yes. So relatively low, depending on where you're coming from. So kind of across the board. Right? Yeah, it is all relative. Typically kind of like 1.25% of purchase price is a good estimation of what your taxes are going to be. Taxes are assessed, and there's kind of 3 or 4 main counties the areas that we covered. They're assessed every between 3 and 5 years. So previously it was between every 5 years, but we've seen so much growth that they want to make sure that they're charging appropriate taxes so they can collect their revenue. And so they've shortened that time period. And so if you got questions, I know which kind of counties have been assessed this year and which ones have been assessed or will be assessed in the next couple of years, but that can play into it. So you might buy the property and it might be a lower amount, and it kind of gets reassessed every 3 years. And so, but that's kind of a general ballpark number. If you just want to broad strokes, 1.25% of what your purchase price will be, knowing that it'll be lower for a couple years. And then once it get reassessed, luckily a lot of the websites, you can go on the property assessors websites and pull that information right there. So they're super helpful if you ever get questions on that, or if you've got questions about specific properties, reach out to me and we get you a pretty close estimate on what those will be. Right
on. Okay. Well, I'm curious to know, being a California guy, we've got earthquakes out here and we've got wildfires out here. Everyone's got something. What do they have in Little Rock?
No earthquakes. No earthquakes out here, thankfully. I've never lived somewhere that has had to deal with that. Main thing is just going to be, a lot of trees. It's a pretty, green area. And so looking out, do you have trees on your property with the sewer lines? We don't have, there are foundation issues everywhere, but it's not like Jackson, Mississippi, where you've got that, the soil that just kind of contracts and causes a lot of those foundation issues. So I think that is a nice thing. You're not having tons of that. It is pretty hilly. And so if you're buying properties on hills, making sure that the water drains around it. So kind of foundation and sewers would be the two things just to keep an eye on.
Okay.
But as long as you got a flat lot and there's no trees on it, you shouldn't have too many issues there. But once you start getting to some of the hillier areas, just keeping an eye on where's that water draining, how's the interior, the crawl space, the basement, on the foundation, how do those look?
Okay. And speaking of water, do you know, are there many flood zones, high hazard flood zones in Little Rock?
It's a great question. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
I don't come into it too often, so I haven't necessarily had to dig into it. So that might be my answer.
That's a good sign. Yeah.
Yeah. But I couldn't tell you where they are on the map.
Okay. All right. And what are some things that people should be aware of that might be kind of par for the course for Little Rock inspection reports for properties in Little Rock that a foreign investor or an out-of-state investor might have not be familiar with? So like in California, termites are fairly common. Not necessarily a deal killer. Do you have something that is fairly common out there that folks just need to be aware of if they're coming from across state lines?
It's pretty standard because I've looked at a lot of different inspection reports from multiple different markets. There's nothing that stands out about Little Rock that is kind of an outlier that you really got to be worried about. But all the standard stuff that we've talked about, getting termite bonds, and then just the normal home inspection stuff that everybody kind of deals with, the major systems. But there's nothing that really stands out when I've looked at kind of market to market that people need to really be focused on. But as long as you're doing a full inspection and working with an inspector who kind of top to bottom does it, you'll be in pretty good shape.
Right on. So, Gray, curious to know, in the Little Rock market, are you seeing this feeding frenzy that we're seeing in a lot of other markets where things are on the market for 4 hours and then getting bids way over ask, or is it a little bit slower there?
It's not that crazy. It's not like it was kind of at the peak in, maybe July, but still seeing multiple offers on properties. And we're not in the 10 range, but you're probably in the 2 to 3, which I love. I mean, that puts us in a position to compete. It's tough when you've got 10 offers that are 8 of them are cash and they're all over asking.
Right.
So we're not seeing that level, but yeah, inventory is still historically low, and seeing new properties be added daily. We've got a pretty wide range that we look at in the market. And so we've got good access to inventory. But buyers do need to be prepared. They need to have their pre-approval letter done. And you guys, Roofstock does a great job of getting them educated. Y'all's academy does an excellent job of getting them, educated. So they're running their numbers and they're calling me with really educated questions, and we can move really fast in those cases. So that's a really important thing for buyers. And so if y'all have not done the Roofstock Academy, please go through that. Michael and his team, and he didn't pay me to say this.
I was just going to ask, tell everyone how much I paid you to say
it. but for real, I mean, it's great because we work with lots of different buyers, and y'all do a good job of getting them from zero to getting in that first offer and building their portfolio. And so with it being as competitive as it is in the market, we've got to have all our ducks in a row, know what we can pay, what's a good return to you, because that's a lot of the times the question is, what should I pay for the house? And a lot of times it's, well, what return are you acceptable with? Right. And then we can kind of go in there. And so, 2 to 3 offers on properties if they're priced right. If they're priced a little bit over, we've been able to get a couple under list price. So not the feeding frenzy, but still competitive. So let's make sure to have our ducks in a row and put in offers quickly, because 48 hours, there's a good shot that they've got an offer that they're at least negotiating.
Okay, great to know. And I appreciate the kind words.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so Gray, you and Evernest and you all are one of Roofstock's certified agents out in the Little Rock market, and you are also preferred property management partner, which is awesome. So can you walk everyone through what the process is if they do make an offer out in the Little Rock market? What should they expect? What does that process flow look like?
Yeah. So Erin Dreer is the kind of general manager, team leader of that market. And people love working with her. She's just an excellent property manager. She knows the market like the back of her hand. And she just gives tons of really good advice on specific rental rates and then specific things that we need to upgrade in the property that maximize the rental return. And I think it's a really important component to be able to pair kind of the brokerage side, buying the house. The property manager has if they can execute your plan, they can really drive your returns. And so Erin is a rock star. So I get her involved really early on in the process. So once we've got a property under contract, we will connect the buyer with the property manager, verify the rental rates, verify kind of the renovation rates, the property manager is going to go out to the house also and check out the house. And so we get them involved early on because we want them, they're going to be a partner in this deal on the long term. And so we get Erin and her team involved really early on. And so post contract acceptance, get the property management team involved, and so we can start getting the ball rolling, because we want to use that diligence time to not only check out the area of the property, the condition of the property, what things need to be done, but also on the rental side and get that squared away. I'm doing a lot of the putting of the properties on Roofstock's website, and a lot of times I'm asking her for, hey, double check my rents on this. I think it's going to be this. What do you think it's going to be? And so I think that's a really good partnership that we've got going on. So I think buyers really love working with her, and I think we can find them some really good long-term buy and holds in the Little Rock and kind of surrounding areas.
That's great. And so what do you look for as you're listing these properties on the website? I mean, what excites you?
So I'm looking at properties. I really like a newer vintage. I'm just seeing those play out with lower maintenance issues, which keeps the tenant happy, which keeps, I think that's the thing you start to realize. Everything's kind of connected. And so you can't just isolate that. But I see this like ripple effect where if you've got a property that has either been rehabbed really well and there's no big maintenance issues, that keeps the tenant happy. Now, as long as we handle the maintenance issues quickly, that's going to keep them in a good shot to renew. And so I kind of like a newer vintage. I'm looking for properties that are closer to move-in ready, because I know how laying out a big cash outlay and the time it takes to get renovations done. So I'm trying to keep that below 5,000 if I can. And we're seeing a lot of that stuff out there, but that's kind of my target, is keeping that below there. And then just strong rental prices. And I'm kind of picking the markets and the neighborhoods that we really like and picking the streets that we really like. And so, looking at from all those, and we'll look at comps, how we think that they're valued. Roofstock software does a really good job of aggregating a lot of that data. But we're trying to triangulate and just kind of put the best properties up there. And trying to get all the information correct on the front end, trying to get that rental rate, talking to PM, because the last thing you want to do is go under contract or even close on the property and realize it's a little bit lower than that. So we're trying to be conservative on that, but trying to a fairly realistic value on the rental rate and then what it's going to take to get that property rented.
Love it. Love it. And you touched on it briefly before, Greg, but curious to know, because we love to be very action oriented, what can buyers do to be really well prepared to work with you and your team in the Little Rock market? And
y'all's team does a good job of really getting them, but that pre-approval letter, and I think having your buy box, like know what you want to buy. I think I always kind of preach that. And when I talk to investors or kind of talk with on other podcasts, know your buy box. And so if you want a 3 or a 4.2 and this area, or you want this return, really kind of laser down on that and only look at properties that fit in your buy box. Because what I've found is you can get this analysis paralysis if you're looking at duplexes, quadplexes, triplexes, single families, and you just get really spread, pretty thin. And I've seen how that wears down on buyers to be processing all that information. And so if you want to set up a call, we can go through your buy box. We can kind of say, hey, these are the potential returns, and then get pretty narrowed in. Hey, I want to look at these 5 areas, and then kind of filter on Roofstock's website to find the properties that fit your buy box. And so if you can do those 2 things, we're in a really good position to know what to offer. And I hit on it earlier, but I think also knowing your return threshold and kind of setting the threshold in there. Yeah. And we can look at list price and know that things are going to go fairly close to list price if it doesn't need a ton of work. But what's an acceptable return to you? And then we can talk together about, how many offers on the property, and we can strategize where are the places in the offer that we can tweak to put you in a good situation to win. So kind of know the return that you're acceptable with. And right now in this market, probably be willing to go closer to list price, and don't view that as a bad thing, because you're going to probably miss out on more deals if just on principle you want to get something below list price. And so that's it's just kind of a starting number, but it's as long as the numbers work for you, over the long term, that's going to turn out to be a really good investment.
Yeah. It's such a good point to make because I think so many people are ego driven. And if it's like, if you can get the property for 100, but the same property is listed at 110, you're like, oh, this is awesome. But if that same property was listed at 90, you'd be like, oh, this is a ripoff. But you still end up paying 100 grand.
Even if somebody bought it for way lower beforehand, that doesn't necessarily, like that might be the market rate. Like they may have bought that from a family member.
Right.
The previous owner might have been in a financial situation, or they might have done the work and you're getting it kind of at market rate. And so I've seen that play in the buyer's heads of them passing on a good property because somebody else had gotten it cheaper.
Right.
And it might be ego, or it might just be nobody wants to get, you don't want to get shorted or get a bad deal and kind of get swindled over. And so I've seen those two things kind of both affect buyers' kind of psyche when they're looking at properties.
Yeah. Well, this is such a great conversation to level set that, to understand like, yeah, this is the expectation going into this market. So just know that. I think it's really, really helpful.
Yeah, 100%.
Awesome. Well, great. This has been awesome, man. Any other tips, tricks, pieces of insight that you want to share with our listeners about this market?
No, reach out to us if you've got questions about it. I'm excited to do this kind of thing because I think it sets a really good primer on the market, but feel free to reach out to me or Aaron Dreer on our team. And yeah, we're excited to get some properties under contract for the buyers. And then, go through the Roofstock Academy, talk with Michael, talk with his team. They do a great job of getting buyers really educated. I really have seen the power of them buy 5 properties. And then they're an expert investor after they've gone through the course and bought a couple of those. So y'all are bringing investing to the masses, which is a really cool thing. So we're really excited to partner with y'all and to continue to help that, grow in the Little Rock market and across the country.
Oh, love it. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
well, if somebody does want to reach out to you or to Aaron or your team, what's the best way that they do that?
So my email is ghall@evernest.co.
Okay.
So that's probably the best way to reach out to me. And then if people have questions, I can connect them with Aaron from there.
Perfect. Well, great. Thanks so much for taking the time. This was a lot of fun, super eye-opening, and I can't wait to see where the Little Rock market goes from here.
Yeah, me as well. Excited about it.
Awesome. Take care, man.
Yep. Thanks. Bye.
All right, everybody. That was our episode. A big thank you to Gray for coming on. Sounds like Gray and his team have a pretty solid handle on the Little Rock market. So if you're interested, definitely give them a reach out. As always, if you liked the episode, feel free to leave us a rating or a review. We look forward to seeing you on the next one, and happy investing.